The war room was filled with the sound of fear. 12 different alien species sat around the massive table, their voices mixing together in a chorus of despair. Some spoke in clicks and whistles, others in deep rumbles that shook the metal floor. But every sound carried the same message. They were losing the war. Commander Hyuk pressed his blue-scaled hands against the cold table surface. His large eyes stared at the holographic display floating above them. Red dots covered most of the galaxy map. Each red dot was a star system that no longer existed. The Devourers had eaten them all. 73% of known space is gone, Hyuk said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. In 3 years, they have destroyed more worlds than we thought possible. Next to him, Ambassador Nari's crystal body reflected the red light from the map. Her species communicated through musical tones, but she had learned to speak in the common language so others could understand her. The Veltar homeworld has 2 months before they reach us, maybe less. Around the table, other representatives shared similar reports. The Nexari had lost their main fleet. The Corvan military was down to 30% strength. The Zephyrians had evacuated their outer colonies. Every species had the same story: retreat, loss, and dwindling hope. The Devourers were unlike any enemy they had faced before. They were not like the old wars between species who fought for territory or resources. The Devourers consumed everything. They ate planets, stars, and entire solar systems, turning all matter into more of themselves. They moved through space like a plague, leaving nothing but empty void behind them. "We have tried everything," said Admiral Wan of the Nexari. His mechanical voice came from speakers built into his robotic body. "Our best weapons, our smartest tactics, our most advanced technology. Nothing works against them." The Nexari were known as the smartest species in the galaxy. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of most others. If they could not find a solution, who could? "Maybe it is time to discuss evacuation," Hyuk said quietly. The words felt like poison in his mouth. "We could load our populations onto ships and flee to the outer rim. Find somewhere they have not reached yet. And when they follow us there?" asked Captain Rin of the Small Aquatic Council. Her gills fluttered with anxiety. "We cannot run forever. Eventually there will be nowhere left to run." The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. The Devourers moved faster than their ships could travel. Even if they evacuated everyone, it would only delay the inevitable. Engineer Bach from the Nexari delegation activated a new display. "I have been studying their movement patterns. They follow a logical path through space, consuming high-energy systems first. If we could predict their route, maybe we could—" "We have tried prediction models before," interrupted Dr. May from the Veltar. "Their hive mind adapts too quickly. Every time we think we understand them, they change their behavior. Because they learn from every battle," Hyuk added. "Every time we fight them, they become better at fighting us. It is like fighting an enemy that grows stronger from every defeat we give them." The discussion continued for hours. They talked about new weapons that might work. They discussed alliance strategies and combined fleet tactics. They even considered trying to communicate with the Devourers, though no one really believed that was possible. As the day wore on, the mood in the room grew darker. Some representatives started talking about final messages to send to their homeworlds. Others discussed how to preserve their species' history and culture for future generations, if any survived. "Perhaps we should vote on the evacuation protocols," Hyuk finally said. He looked around the table at faces that showed despair, anger, and resignation. "At least some of our people might survive if we start moving them now." "I second the motion," said Nari. Her musical voice sounded like a funeral song. "All in favor of beginning full-scale evacuation procedures?" Hyuk asked. Hands, claws, tentacles, and other appendages began to rise around the table. It felt like surrendering, but what choice did they have? Then the main doors to the war room opened with a loud hiss. Everyone turned to look. The doors were supposed to be locked during council sessions. Only the highest-ranking officials had access codes. But someone was walking through them anyway. The figure was bipedal, about average height for most species. It wore armor that looked primitive compared to modern designs. Metal plates held together with physical fasteners instead of energy fields. The being had 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head in roughly the same arrangement as several other species. But there was something different about it. The eyes faced forward instead of to the sides. Most prey species had forward-facing eyes, but this being moved with the confidence of a predator. Its skin was a pale pink color that none of them recognized. Dark hair covered the top of its head, and more hair grew on its face around the mouth. "I hear you need someone who knows how to win impossible wars," the stranger said. The voice was strong and clear, speaking perfect coalition standard. But that was impossible. The accent, the vocal patterns, the way it formed words. This was a human. But humans were extinct. The room erupted into chaos. Several representatives jumped to their feet. Others activated personal shields or reached for weapons. Security alarms began blaring as the station's defense systems detected an unknown intruder. "That's impossible," Admiral Wan said. His mechanical voice rose above the noise. "Humans died 50 years ago when the Devourers consumed the Sol system." "Security breach," announced the station's computer. "Unknown biological entity detected in council chambers." "Wait," Hyuk said, raising his hand for silence. The room slowly quieted, though everyone remained tense. "State your identity and explain how you entered this room." The human, if that's what it really was, remained calm despite having dozens of weapons pointed at it. "Captain Day, formerly of the Earth Defense Force. As for how I got in, your security is designed to stop known threats. Humans have been officially extinct for 50 years, so your systems don't scan for us." "Prove you are human," demanded Dr. May. Her crystal body pulsed with suspicious light patterns. Day reached into a pocket and pulled out a small device. He placed it on the table and activated it. A holographic image appeared. A blue and green planet covered in white clouds. Earth, 3rd planet from Sol. Population was about 8 billion when the Devourers arrived. Several aliens leaned forward to study the image. Earth was in the historical databases, but seeing it like this was different. The planet looked peaceful, beautiful even. Hard to believe such a nice world had produced a species known for violence. "Humans were classified as a minor species," said Ambassador Nari. "Limited technology, short lifespans, no significant military power. Your homeworld fell in less than a week when the Devourers attacked." "That's what the records say," Day agreed. "But the records are wrong about a few things, such as the fact that some of us survived." Engineer Bach's mechanical parts whirred as he processed this information. "Impossible. The entire Sol system was consumed. We have probe data confirming total matter absorption. The system is gone," Day said. "But not everyone was in the system when it fell." He gestured to the holographic Earth. "Humans have always been explorers. By the time the Devourers reached us, we had ships scattered across dozens of sectors. Mining operations, research stations, colony ships looking for new homes. Most of our population died, yes, but thousands of ships escaped." "Where have you been for 50 years? asked Captain Rin. "Hiding, learning, fighting." "Fighting?" Hayek leaned forward with interest. "You have been engaging the Devourers?" "In small groups, with hit-and-run tactics. Nothing like your big fleet. Battles. We learned early that conventional warfare doesn't work against them." Admiral Wan made a sound like electronic laughter. "If the combined might of 12 advanced civilizations cannot stop them, what could a few primitive human ships accomplish?" Day smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "We could learn how they think, how they move, how they die." "You claim to understand the Devourers better than our best scientists?" Dr. May's voice carried clear disbelief. "I claim that humans have experience with enemies that seem unstoppable," Day replied. "We've been fighting impossible wars since before we reached the stars. It's what we do." The room fell silent again. Everyone stared at this strange survivor from a supposedly extinct species. He stood calmly under their scrutiny, showing no fear or intimidation. "What do you want?" Hayek finally asked. "To help you win." "And what do you want in return?" "A chance to make them pay for what they did to Earth." Hyuk looked around the table at his fellow council members. They had been about to vote for evacuation, essentially admitting defeat. Now this human appeared, claiming to have answers they didn't. It seemed too good to be true. But what did they have to lose? Very well, Captain Day, HFY said. You may observe our proceedings, but do not expect us to change our strategies based on the word of one survivor from a minor species. Day nodded. I understand. But I think you'll find that being underestimated has always been humanity's greatest advantage. He took a seat at the edge of the room, away from the main table. As the council resumed their discussion, they were aware of his presence, watching, listening, and occasionally taking notes on a primitive paper tablet. None of them realized they had Jay. 3 days later, Captain Day stood before the full War Council with a tactical display showing the upcoming Battle of Kepler Station. The real battle had happened 6 months ago and ended in disaster for the coalition forces. Now Day was about to show them how it should have been fought. 40,000 coalition ships, he began, highlighting different fleet groups on the display. Against 12,000 Devourer vessels, you outnumbered them more than 3 to 1, yet we still lost, Admiral Wan said bitterly. Their individual ships are more powerful than ours. Power isn't everything. Position matters more. Day manipulated the display to show the station's location near a dense asteroid field. Tell me why you chose to defend the station itself. Engineer Bach activated his cybernetic interface. The mining facility was processing rare minerals essential for ship construction. Losing it would have set back our fleet production by months. And where did you position your defensive fleet? In a standard protective formation around the station. Commander HFY replied, 3 defensive shells with our heaviest ships on, the outer perimeter. Day nodded and began altering the tactical display. Human generals would have looked at this situation differently. First question, what do the Devourers actually want here? The processed minerals, Dr. May answered. Wrong. They want the raw materials. The Devourers can process minerals themselves, probably more efficiently than your machinery. The station is worthless to them. Ambassador Nari's musical voice carried confusion. Then why did they attack it? Because you were defending it. You made it important by putting 40,000 ships there. Day highlighted the asteroid field on the display. This is what they really wanted. Millions of tons of raw materials just floating in space, easy to collect and consume. The field was too large to defend, protested Captain Rin. Exactly. So you shouldn't have tried to defend it. You should have destroyed it. The room erupted. In shocked voices, Engineer Bach was the loudest. That would eliminate the entire reason for defending the system in the first place. Better to lose the materials than to lose the materials and 40,000 ships. But the economic impact, there is no economic impact if your civilization is extinct. Day changed the display to show his alternative strategy. Human approach. Evacuate the station, mine the asteroid field with explosives, then retreat to the edge of the system. And then, HFY asked, wait for them to enter the field and detonate everything at once. The tactical display showed the results of such an explosion, a massive burst of energy that would have crippled or destroyed most of the Devourer fleet. The explosion would also destroy any possibility of future mining, Admiral Wan pointed out. So? There are thousands of other asteroid fields in the galaxy. There are not thousands of other coalition fleets. Dr. May's crystalline form pulsed with agitated patterns. This strategy requires accepting the total loss of strategic resources. This strategy requires accepting that some losses are better than others. Day activated another display showing human warfare from their homeworld. Images of ancient battles flashed across the screen, armies destroying bridges behind them, generals burning their own ships to prevent retreat, cities sacrificing themselves to slow enemy advances. Humans learned early that sometimes you have to destroy what you love to prevent your enemy from taking it. We called it scorched earth tactics. Barbaric, Engineer Bach muttered. Effective, Day countered. Would you rather be barbaric or extinct? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Captain Su from the Aquatic Council was the first to speak. Show us more. Day smiled and changed the display to show a different battle. The defense of Proxima Station. You lost 15,000 ships protecting a medical research facility. That facility was developing treatments for radiation poisoning from Devourer. Weapons, Dr. May said defensively, and you defended it by surrounding it with your medical fleet. Of course. Those ships had the best defensive shields and the most advanced medical equipment. So when the Devourers attacked, they destroyed your entire medical capacity in one battle. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. They were beginning to see the pattern. Human approach? Hayek asked. Abandon the station, but first upload all research data to every ship in the fleet. Then use the medical ships as decoys while you're real combat. Fleet attacks from an unexpected direction. Use medical ships as decoys? Ambassador Nari sounded horrified. They would be destroyed. Some of them, yes. But you lost all of them the way you actually fought the battle. This way, you save most of your medical capacity and hurt the enemy in return. It still seems unnecessarily cruel, Dr. May said. War is cruel. The question is whether you want to be cruel to your enemy or let them be cruel to you. Day brought up another tactical scenario. The evacuation of Rigel Colony. 3 million civilians, 48 hours to escape before the Devourers arrived. We saved 2.7 million, Captain Rin said proudly. One of our most successful evacuation operations. You could have saved all of them. Impossible. We didn't have enough transport capacity. You had enough ships. You just used them wrong. Day highlighted the evacuation fleet composition. 60 transport ships, 20 escort vessels. But you also had 40 cargo freighters carrying essential supplies and equipment. Cultural artifacts, historical records, industrial equipment, Engineer Bach explained. Things necessary to rebuild their civilization. Things that don't matter if the people are dead. Day altered the display to show his alternative approach. Strip the cargo ships, pack them with people instead of objects. Yes, you lose the cultural heritage, but you save 300,000 lives. Those artifacts represented thousands of years of cultural development, protested Ambassador Nari, and those people represented the future of the species. Which is more important? The debate that followed was heated. Some council members argued that preserving civilization meant more than just preserving lives. Others began to see Day's point about priorities. You're asking us to abandon everything that makes us civilized, Admiral Wan said. I'm asking you to stay alive long enough to be civilized again later. Captain Yule from the Corvan military leaned forward. These tactics, they require accepting heavy losses. They require accepting necessary losses to prevent total losses. And you believe humans are better at making these calculations? Humans are better at making these calculations because we've had to make them more often. Day activated a new display showing human military history. My species fought continuously for most of its existence. We learned to think strategically about survival because the alternative was extinction. But surely some of your wars were fought for other reasons, Dr. May said. Territory, resources, ideology. All of those, yes. But underneath every conflict was the same basic question. How do we survive when someone wants us dead? And the answer? Make sure they die first. The simple brutality of the statement shocked them into silence. These aliens had developed complex philosophies about warfare, detailed rules of engagement, sophisticated theories about proportional response. Humans had developed one rule: win. Let me show you something else, Day said, bringing up sensor data from recent Devourer attacks. Pattern recognition is another area where humans excel. He highlighted movement patterns in the data. Look at their approach vectors. Every attack follows the same basic pattern. Probe for weak points, concentrate force, overwhelm defenses. Standard military doctrine, Engineer Bach observed. Exactly. They fight like a military organization. Logical, efficient, predictable. And this helps us how? Because humans learned to fight enemies who were logical and predictable. We called it asymmetric warfare, using unpredictable tactics against predictable opponents. Day showed them examples from human history. Guerrilla, warfare, suicide attacks, false flag operations, strategic deception, all designed to make your enemy waste resources fighting ghosts. Give us a specific example, Commander Yuck demanded. The Vega convoy run I mentioned before. You're planning to send 60 cargo ships with a standard escort of 20 warships. Correct. The Devourers will attack with approximately 40 ships, based on their previous response patterns. They'll expect you to defend the convoy using standard protective formations. What do you suggest instead? Send the convoy, but make half the cargo ships into bombs. When they attack, detonate everything and use the explosion to mask an attack by hidden warships. Hidden where? In the wreckage of the last convoy they destroyed in that sector, they don't bother to scan dead ships carefully. The idea was so audacious that several council members began speaking at once. The concept of using their own destroyed vessels as cover for an ambush violated every principle of civilized warfare. This plan requires sacrificing 30 cargo ships and their crews, Admiral Wan pointed out. This plan requires sacrificing 30 crews to save 60 crews and destroy 40 enemy ships. The mathematics are sound, Engineer Bach admitted reluctantly. But the ethical implications of losing are worse. Captain Sue raised a webbed hand. What about the cargo? Supplies needed for colony worlds? Load the remaining ships with double cargo. Better to deliver half of what's needed than to deliver nothing because the convoy was destroyed. Dr. May leaned back in her chair, her crystals. The communication came during what should have been a quiet morning. Captain Day was in his quarters, reviewing tactical reports, when the priority signal arrived on a frequency that had been silent for 50 years. Day, this is Dr. Yu. Are you receiving? Day's hands moved quickly over the controls, establishing a secure quantum link. Yu, I'm here. What's your status? Hidden Fleet Bravo 7, holding position in the Kepler debris field. We've been monitoring Coalition communications. Are you really advising them? As much as they'll let me. What's your situation? 43 ships, mixed class. We've been shadowing Devourer movements for 8 months. Day, we've learned things. Commander Hawk entered the room just as the conversation was getting interesting. Day gestured for him to stay quiet and listen. What kind of things? Day asked. Behavioral. Patterns? Weaknesses? The Devourers aren't as unstoppable as everyone thinks. Hayek's scaled features showed intense interest. This was the first time anyone had claimed to find significant weaknesses in their enemy. Go ahead, Yu. They're efficient, but efficiency makes them predictable. We've been tracking 17 different Devourer fleets, and they all follow similar patterns. Explain. They prefer high-energy targets, stars, gas giants, dense asteroid, fields. They avoid dead systems and low-energy planets. Their hive mind prioritizes resource gathering over tactical advantage. D activated his room's display system so Hayek could see the data as it came through. What else? Response times. When we hit them with small attacks, it takes exactly 47 minutes for them to reorganize their fleet patterns. Every time. No variation? 47 minutes, Day repeated for Hayek's benefit. That's a significant window. It gets better. Their hive clusters have a maximum effective range of approximately 12 light hours. Beyond that distance, they rely on slower-than-light communication methods. Hayek stepped forward. Dr. Yu, this is Commander Hayek of the Coalition Defense Council. May I ask how you obtained this information? There was a pause. Who is this? He's the military commander I've been working with, Day explained. You can speak freely. We obtained it by doing what humans do best. We got close enough to study them while they were busy killing us. Elaborate. Suicide scouting missions. Volunteers who flew modified ships into Devourer formations, transmitted everything they saw, then self-destructed to avoid capture. The casual mention of suicide missions made Hayek uncomfortable. How many volunteers? Over 300 so far. But each mission gave us more data about how they think and move. Dai brought up tactical displays to show Hayek what Yu was describing. Human intelligence gathering has always been different from other species. Different how? We accept that some information can only be obtained by people who don't come back. Dr. Yu's voice continued through the communicator. Day, there's something else. We've found other human fleets. How many? At least 12 separate groups. Maybe more. Total surviving human population is somewhere around 50,000. Hayek's eyes widened. An entire species presumed extinct, still fighting their own war in the shadows. What have they been doing? Day asked. Learning. Each fleet has specialized in studying different aspects of Devourer behavior. Fleet Charlie 9 focused on their reproduction cycles. Fleet Delta 2 studied their ship construction methods. Fleet Echo 5 has been tracking their long-term movement patterns. And what have you learned? That they're not as mysterious as the Coalition thinks. They're just very good at what they do. Dr. Yu transmitted a massive data package, years of observations, battle reports, and behavioral studies compiled by hidden human fleets throughout the galaxy. "This is incredible," Hayek breathed as he scanned through the information. "Why haven't you shared this before?" "Because we weren't sure anyone would believe us," Yu replied. "And because we needed to verify our theories through multiple independent observations." "Have you?" "Yes. Every human fleet has reached the same basic conclusions." Day was already analyzing the data, his mind working through the implications. "Yu, what's your assessment? Can they be beaten?" "They can be hurt, badly, but it requires tactics that no civilized species would consider." "Such as?" "Total warfare. No rules, no mercy, no consideration for anything except victory." Hayek listened as Dr. Yu explained what humans had learned through bitter experience. The Devourers were incredibly effective at conventional warfare, but they had weaknesses that could be exploited by opponents willing to fight dirty. "Their hive mind is both a strength and a vulnerability," Yu continued. "It makes them coordinated, but it also makes them predictable. They can't adapt quickly to truly random behavior." "Define random," Day said. "Attacks that make no strategic sense, sacrificing valuable assets to destroy worthless targets, defending empty space while abandoning important systems." "That sounds like madness," Hyuk protested. "It sounds like madness to them, too." "That's why it works." Dr. Yu transmitted tactical analyses showing how human fleets had successfully confused Devourer forces by acting irrationally. Ships that should have retreated instead launched kamikaze attacks. Fleets that should have defended key systems instead vanished into empty space, only to reappear somewhere completely unexpected. "We've been teaching them that humans are unpredictable," Yu explained. "Every time they think they understand our behavior, we do something that doesn't fit their models." "With what results?" "They're starting to allocate extra resources to deal with human territories. Ships that could be attacking coalition worlds are instead searching empty sectors for human fleets that might not even be there." Day smiled grimly. "Psychological warfare. The best kind. We're making them afraid of ghosts." Hyuk studied the data with growing amazement. "These tactics, they require enormous sacrifice. Every human fleet has accepted that they probably won't survive the war," Yu said matter-of-factly. "But we're determined to make our deaths count for something." "That's a very human attitude," Day observed. "It's the only attitude that makes sense when you're facing extinction." The conversation continued for another hour. Dr. Yu shared details about Devourer weaknesses that coalition scientists had missed. She explained how human fleets coordinated their attacks without using detectable communication methods. She described weapons and tactics that had proven effective against supposedly invincible enemies. Most importantly, she revealed that humans had been developing what they called chaos doctrine, a comprehensive approach to fighting enemies who were more powerful but less adaptable. "The key is unpredictability," Yu explained. "Every action must serve a purpose, but that purpose doesn't have to be obvious to the enemy." "Give us an example," Hyuk requested. "Fleet Alpha 3 spent 6 months attacking empty systems that the IA Devourers had already consumed. Made no sense strategically. There was nothing to gain. But it forced the Devourers to send investigation fleets to figure out what humans were looking for." "And what were you looking for?" "Nothing. We just wanted them to waste time and resources on a mystery that didn't exist. While they were distracted, other human fleets hit their real targets in different sectors. The random attacks were just misdirection." Hyuk was beginning to understand the sophistication of human strategy. It wasn't simply brutal, it was brutally clever. "Dr. Yu," he said, "would you be willing to share this information with our full tactical council?" "That depends. Are they willing to use it? Use it how? To fight like humans. No rules. No mercy. No concern for anything except survival." There was a long pause. Then Hayek said, "I believe they may be ready to consider such an approach. Then we'll transmit everything we have. But Commander, understand what you're asking for, which is to become something your species has never been before. Warriors, without limits. And if we refuse, then you'll die civilized, which is more than the Devourers will let you do." After the communication ended, Hayek sat quietly for several minutes, processing what he had learned. An entire species had been fighting a shadow war for 50 years, developing tactics and strategies that no coalition world had imagined. How? Many more human fleets are out there? He finally asked. Unknown, Day replied. We've lost contact with most groups. Some are probably dead. Others are too deep in hiding to risk communication. But they're all fighting the same war we are. No, they're fighting the war we should be fighting. Explain the difference. You're fighting to preserve your civilization. They're fighting to destroy the enemy's ability to threaten anyone. And which approach is more likely to succeed? The one that accepts that preservation and destruction are sometimes the same thing. Hyuk activated his communicator to contact the council. Emergency. Session. Priority Alpha clearance. We have new intelligence that could change everything. As they prepared to share humanity's hard-won knowledge with the coalition, Day wondered if the other species would be able to embrace the brutal pragmatism that survival required. Commander, he said as they headed for the door. Yes? When your people learn what fighting like humans really means, some of them won't like it. Will it work? It's worked for us. Then we'll learn to like it. As they walked through the station corridors, Day realized that the coalition was about to discover something that humans had known for millennia. Sometimes the only way to remain civilized is to temporarily become utterly ruthless. The Questie. The first test of human tactics came sooner than expected. A massive devourer fleet appeared at the edge of the Helix Nebula, directly threatening the Veltar homeworld. 300 enemy ships moved in perfect formation toward a system that contained billions of lives. Captain Sue stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display with grim determination. Around her, the Coalition's combined fleet prepared for what many believed would be their final battle. 200 ships against 300, odds that would have been acceptable in normal warfare, but the Devourers were never normal. Captain, her communications officer reported, Commander Hayek is requesting final confirmation of battle plans. Tell him we're committed to the human approach, Sue replied. No retreat, no mercy, no rules. The human approach. 3 weeks ago, she would never have imagined using such words to describe coalition tactics. But 3 weeks ago, they had been losing every engagement. Captain Day, are your people in position? She asked. Day's voice came through the quantum communicator from his hidden position in the nebula's outer ring. All human fleets are ready. Dr. Yu confirms that Bravo 7 is standing by. Fleet Alpha 4 reports they've finished mining the asteroid field. Mining? Every major asteroid now contains enough explosives to crack a small moon. When the Devourers enter the field, we'll turn the entire nebula into a weapon. The plan was insane by coalition standards. Instead of meeting the enemy in open space, they were luring them into a trap that would destroy everything in the nebula, including most of their own forces. All ships, Sue announced over the fleet communication system. Remember what we learned from our human advisors. Victory is more important than survival. Hurting them is more important than protecting ourselves. On her tactical display, she could see the Devourer fleet approaching the nebula's edge. Their formation was perfect, their movement predictable, their confidence absolute. They had destroyed dozens of systems using the same basic approach. They expect us to defend the inner system, reported her tactical officer, Captain Wall. Standard protective formation around the inhabited worlds. Instead, we're going to disappear. The coalition fleet began implementing the first phase of human tactical doctrine, total unpredictability. Instead of forming defensive lines, the ships scattered throughout the nebula in seemingly random patterns. Some headed toward empty space, others moved toward the Devourer fleet. A few simply shut down their engines and drifted like debris. Enemy fleet has entered the nebula, Wall reported. They're slowing down, probably confused by our deployment. Good. Confusion is what we want. Through the communicator, Day's voice provided commentary. They're trying to analyze your positions using their standard threat assessment models. But there's no pattern for them to understand. Because there is no pattern? Because the pattern only makes sense if you're willing to sacrifice everything to hurt them. Phase 2 began when the Devourer fleet reached the nebula's center. Captain Jin, commanding a group of damaged coalition ships, suddenly appeared on their sensors. His vessels looked crippled, defenseless, perfect targets for easy destruction. The Devourers took the bait. "They're moving to engage Jin's group," Wool reported. "Standard envelopment pattern. Signal Captain Jin. Execute Human Protocol 7. What happened next would have horrified Coalition military commanders a month ago. Instead of retreating when surrounded, Jin's ships accelerated directly toward the Devourer formation. Instead of trying to preserve their vessels, they activated every weapon system simultaneously, overloading their power cores. 12 Coalition ships exploded in a coordinated sequence, turning themselves into guided bombs. The explosions weren't large enough to destroy the Devourer vessels, but they weren't meant to. They were meant to disrupt formation and create chaos. "Direct hits on 17 enemy ships," Wall announced. "Enemy formation is breaking up." "Phase 3, Sue ordered. Hidden throughout the nebula, human ships that had been playing dead suddenly came alive. These weren't powerful warships. They were modified cargo vessels, mining ships, even converted passenger liners. But each one carried enough explosives to level a city. Dr. Yu's voice crackled through the communicator. "Beginning asteroid detonation sequence. All ships clear the inner ring." The asteroids that had been mined with explosives began detonating in a carefully planned sequence. Not all at once, which would have been survivable, but in a cascade pattern that created overlapping shockwaves throughout the nebula. "The entire nebula is turning into a weapon," Day explained as the explosions lit up their sensors. "The Devourers are caught in a three-dimensional minefield with no safe direction to retreat." But the human tactics weren't finished. As the Devourers struggled to escape the exploding asteroid field, Captain Yule led the main coalition fleet in an attack that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of targeting military vessels, they focused on Devourer support ships. Instead of engaging in honorable combat, they used the chaos of the explosions to launch surprise attacks from impossible angles. Instead of following predictable attack patterns, they deliberately chose targets that made no strategic sense. "Why are we attacking their scout ships instead of their battleships?" Wool asked during the battle. "Because they expect us to attack the battleships," Sue replied. "Human doctrine says that doing the unexpected is more valuable than doing the logical." The battle raged for 6 hours. Coalition ships died in terrible numbers, often sacrificing themselves to destroy single enemy vessels. Human fleets emerged from hiding to launch kamikaze attacks, then vanished back into the nebula's chaos. But slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. "Enemy fleet is retreating," Wall announced with disbelief in his voice. "Retreating? The Devourer. Ships are withdrawing from the nebula. They're running away." Through the communicator, they could hear cheering from human ships throughout the battle zone. It was the first time a Devourer fleet had ever retreated from battle. "Doctor, what's your assessment?" Day asked. "We hurt them badly. They lost nearly 40 ships and the rest are damaged. But more importantly, we did something they couldn't predict or counter, which was, we made them afraid." Captain Sue studied the tactical aftermath. The coalition had lost 90 ships, nearly half their force. By any traditional measure, it should have been considered a defeat. But the Devourers had lost more ships and, for the first time in the war, they had chosen to retreat rather than fight to the end. "Commander Hayek, this is Captain Sue. The Helix Nebula is secure." "Understood, Captain. What are your casualties?" "Heavy, but acceptable." "Acceptable?" "We traded 90 ships for 40 Devourer vessels and proved that they can be beaten. That's an acceptable exchange rate." Hayek was quiet for a moment. "Captain, a month ago, you would never have described such losses as acceptable. A month ago, I hadn't learned to think like a human." After the battle, the surviving ships regrouped at the nebula's edge. The celebration was subdued. Too many friends had died for any real joy. But there was something new in the crew's faces, something that hadn't been there before the battle. Hope. "Captain Day," Sue said, as the human ships prepared to return to their hiding places. "Will you stay with the Coalition fleet?" "For now. But my people have other battles to fight." "Other human fleets?" 50,000 humans scattered across the galaxy, all fighting the same war in their own ways. Today's victory will be transmitted to every hidden fleet. They'll know that human tactics work against devourer forces. And then they'll start hunting. As the human ships vanished back into the void, Sue realized that the war had fundamentally changed. The Coalition was no longer fighting a defensive action against an unstoppable enemy. They were now part of a galaxy-wide campaign of vengeance, led by a species that refused to accept defeat. All ships, she announced to her fleet, prepare for the next engagement. And remember what we learned today. Which is, asked Captain Wall, that sometimes the only way to win is to be willing to lose everything. Over the following weeks, reports began arriving from across the galaxy. Human fleets were emerging from 50 years of hiding to launch coordinated attacks on devourer positions. Coalition forces that had learned human tactics were winning battles they should have lost. The devourers, for the first time in their existence, were facing an enemy that fought without rules, limits, or regard for their own survival. Dr. Yu, Dai said during one of their regular communications, "What's the latest intelligence from the other human fleets?" "They're adapting our tactics for their own operations. Fleet Charlie 9 just destroyed a devourer breeding facility by ramming a converted asteroid into it. Fleet Delta 2 eliminated an entire scout group by pretending to be refugees and then self-destructing when the devourers moved to consume them. And the Coalition species? Learning fast. The Nexari have started using kamikaze drones. The Veltar are experimenting with unpredictable attack patterns. Even the Corvins are beginning to understand that honor is less important than victory." Day smiled grimly. "Maybe there's hope after all. There's always hope. It's just a question of how much you're willing to pay for it. And how much are humans willing to pay? Everything. We learned a long time ago that survival is worth any price. As more reports came in from across the Devourer home base was a nightmare made real. 3 captured stars hung in an artificial configuration, their energy being slowly consumed by a massive biological structure that stretched across light years of space. It was beautiful in its horror. A living weapon that could birth entire fleets and had the power to crack planets. Admiral Wu stood on the bridge of the human flagship, watching the tactical display with the calm expression of someone who had already accepted death. Around her, the largest gathering of human ships in 50 years prepared for what would certainly be their final battle. "All fleets report ready," Captain Day announced from his position at the communications station. "Coalition forces, human, survivors. Even some civilian vessels that volunteered for the mission. How many ships total?" 837, against a target that's defended by over 2,000 Devourer vessels. Those are terrible odds. Yes, perfect for a human-style attack. Through the viewports, they could see the other ships in their fleet. Coalition vessels that had learned to fight like humans. Hidden human fleets that had emerged from 50 years of shadow warfare. Even converted civilian ships crewed by volunteers who understood they wouldn't be going home. "Admiral," Dr. Yu reported from the science station, "we're receiving transmissions from the other attack groups. The plan was pure insanity. Multiple, simultaneous assaults on a target that should have been completely impregnable. Instead of one coordinated attack, they were launching dozens of smaller strikes from every direction, each one designed to be unpredictable enough to confuse the Devourer defense systems. Group Alpha reports they're beginning their approach," Yu continued. "Captain Jin confirms that the Suicide Squadron is in position. The Suicide Squadron, 50 volunteers in ships loaded with enough explosives to destroy small moons. Their job was to ram themselves into the biostructure's weakest points, creating breaches that other ships could exploit. Group Beta is moving to attack the outer defensive ring," Day added. "Commander Hayek says the Coalition species are adapting to human tactics better than expected." Meaning? Meaning they've stopped worrying about survival and started focusing on damage. Admiral Wu activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Wu. In 30 minutes, we will begin the final assault on the Devourer home base." She paused, looking around the bridge at faces that showed fear, determination, and grim acceptance. "I won't lie to you. Most of us will die today, but our deaths will serve a purpose." Through the speakers, she could hear similar speeches being given on hundreds of other ships. Human captains, Coalition commanders, even civilian volunteers, all preparing their crews for a battle that logic said they couldn't win. "The Devourers think they understand us," Wu continued. They think we're just another species that can be consumed and forgotten. Today, we're going to teach them that humans don't know how to be forgotten. Admiral, reported her tactical, Officer Captain Min, enemy forces are responding to our approach. They're forming standard defensive formations. Standard formations against a non-standard attack. Good. Let them waste time trying to understand what we're doing. The first phase of the assault began with Captain Jin's suicide squadron. 50 ships accelerated toward the biostructure at maximum speed. Their crews broadcasting human war songs that hadn't been heard for 50 years. They're not even trying to evade defensive fire, Min observed, because evasion would slow them down. Speed is more important than survival. The ships struck the biostructure in rapid succession, their explosions creating massive breaches in the alien construction. Each explosion was a funeral pyre for brave souls who had chosen to make their deaths count. Breaches confirmed in sections 7 through 12, Dr. Yu reported. The structure is bleeding atmosphere and energy. Phase 2, Wu ordered. From dozens of different directions, human and coalition fleets began their own attacks. But these weren't conventional assaults. They were chaos incarnate. Ships that should have targeted military objectives instead focused on seemingly random parts of the structure. Attacks that should have been coordinated instead deliberately interfered with each other. Why are we targeting empty sections? Min asked as their weapons struck parts of the biostructure that showed no strategic value. Because the Devourers expect us to target important sections. Human doctrine. Do what your enemy least expects. The brilliant madness of the strategy slowly became apparent. The Devourers had allocated their defenses based on logical threat assessment. Military ships defended military targets. Important systems were heavily protected. But the human-led coalition wasn't attacking logically. They were attacking randomly, forcing the Devourers to spread their defenses across thousands of potential targets instead of concentrating on a few important ones. Enemy forces are becoming disorganized, Yu reported. They're trying to respond to attacks that don't follow any pattern they can recognize. Good. Confusion is our greatest weapon. The battle raged across the entire star system. Human ships that had hidden for 50 years emerged to launch surprise attacks. Coalition vessels that had learned human tactics sacrificed themselves to damage targets that seemed worthless. Civilian volunteers flew converted cargo ships into defensive positions, buying time with their lives. Admiral, Day called from his station. Dr. Yu's group has reached the core structure. What's her status? She's requesting permission to execute Protocol Omega. Protocol Omega. The final gambit that even humans had been reluctant to discuss. It involved converting their ship's reactor into a controlled stellar collapse, essentially creating a small star's death inside the biostructure. Casualties? Total. Her entire fleet would be vaporized. And the effect on the target? Complete destruction of the core breeding facilities, maybe enough damage to cripple their entire operation. Admiral Wu was quiet for a moment. Dr. Yu had been fighting this war longer than almost anyone. She had sacrificed 50 years of her life to study the enemy and develop weapons that could hurt them. Tell Dr. Yu she has permission to execute Protocol Omega. Admiral, Min said quietly, that's 300 more lives. 300 lives to save billions. It's the most human calculation possible. Through the communication system, they could hear Dr. Yu's final transmission. All human fleets, this is Dr. Yu. It has been an honor to serve with you. Remember us when you tell the story of how the Devourers died. The explosion that followed was visible from light years away. Dr. Yu's modified ships had created a chain reaction that consumed the biostructure's core, sending shockwaves through the entire artificial system. Core destruction confirmed, Min reported, his voice filled with awe. The biostructure is collapsing. All remaining ships, Wu announced, continue the attack. Don't let them recover. What followed was the most brutal assault in galactic history. Ships that should have retreated instead pressed their attacks until their weapons overloaded. Crews that should have surrendered when their vessels were crippled instead rammed themselves into enemy positions. Human and coalition forces that should have preserved themselves for future battles instead spent their lives like currency to purchase victory. Admiral, Captain Day reported, we're receiving retreat signals from Devourer fleets across the galaxy. Retreat signals? The destruction of their home base has disrupted their hive-mind coordination. They're losing cohesion. Through the tactical displays, they could see the impossible happening. The Devourer fleet, which had never retreated from any battle, was abandoning the star system. Their perfect coordination was breaking down as the loss of their central structure created chaos in their collective intelligence. Admiral Wu, came a transmission from Commander Hyuk's ship. Coalition forces are reporting Devourer withdrawals from 17 different systems. Confirm that. Confirmed. They're retreating across the entire front. For the first time in 4 years, the Devourers were running away. All ships, Wu announced to the surviving fleet, cease fire, regroup for damage assessment. As the immediate battle ended, the true cost became apparent. Of the 800 ships that had begun the assault, fewer than 200 survived. Entire human fleets had been wiped out. Coalition forces that had learned to fight like humans had paid the ultimate price for that education, but they had won. Captain Day, Wu said quietly, what's the status of the other human fleets? Heavy casualties across the board. But we've accomplished our objective, which was to prove that the Devourers can be beaten and to hurt them badly enough that they'll think twice before attacking anyone again. Over the following weeks, reports came in from across the galaxy. Devourer fleets that had been advancing on coalition worlds suddenly stopped and began retreating. Systems that had been under siege for months were suddenly free. The enemy that had seemed unstoppable was withdrawing to unknown regions of space. The war wasn't over. There were still Devourer forces scattered throughout the galaxy, but their main strength was broken, their coordination disrupted, their aura of invincibility shattered. Captain Day, Admiral Wu said during one of their final briefings, what will the surviving human fleets do now? Keep fighting. There are still Devourers out there, and humans don't forgive easily. And the Coalition. They've learned to fight like humans, Taeho Kim floated in the darkness of space, watching the massive alien ship grow larger in front of him. The Velithron mothership looked like a giant metal mountain. It was bigger than any city he had ever seen. Weapons covered its surface like deadly spikes. This ship had destroyed his home. This ship had killed his family. 3 months ago, Taeho had been a simple marine captain on New Busan Colony. He had a wife named Mira and 2 young children. They lived in a small house near the spaceport. Taeho would come home every evening to find his kids playing in the garden while Mira cooked dinner. Life was good. Life was simple. Then the Velithrons came. They arrived without warning. Their ships appeared in the sky like black clouds. They did not try to talk. They did not ask for surrender. They simply began killing. Their weapons turned buildings into dust. Their soldiers walked through the streets, shooting anyone they found. Taeho had been at the military base when the attack started. He watched on the screens as his neighborhood burned. He tried to call Mira, but the communication lines were cut. He tried to go home, but the roads were blocked by enemy forces. By the time he reached his house, there was nothing left but ash and broken stones. He found their bodies in what used to be the kitchen. Mira was holding their youngest child. Their older son was nearby, still clutching his toy spaceship. The Velithrons had shot them all, even the children, even his baby. Taeho knelt in the ruins of his home and cried. Then he stood up and made a promise. He would make the aliens pay. Now, 3 months later, he was about to keep that promise. The small scout ship he was flying had been captured from the Velithrons during a raid. Human engineers had spent weeks studying it. They learned how to fly it. More importantly, they learned how to make it look like it belonged to the enemy. Taeho wore a special suit that would fool the alien sensors. It made his body heat signature look like a Velithron. It changed the way his heartbeat sounded. It even made him smell like the enemy. The suit was uncomfortable and heavy, but it would keep him alive. His mission was simple, but deadly. He had to sneak onto the mothership. He had to find the main computer core. He had to plant a virus that would destroy their systems. Then he had to send information back to the human fleet hiding behind Earth's moon. Everyone knew it was a suicide mission. The chances of getting onto the ship were small. The chances of completing the mission were smaller. The chances of getting out alive were almost zero. Taeho did not care. His family was dead. His home was destroyed. If he died completing this mission, at least he would take some of the aliens with him. The scout ship's computer made a soft, beeping sound. They were close enough now for the mothership's sensors to detect them. Tae-ho pressed a button, and the ship began broadcasting Velithran identification codes. To any alien watching, it would look like one of their own ships returning from patrol. The mothership was enormous. As Tae-ho got closer, he could see thousands of windows glowing with pale blue light. He could see smaller ships moving in and out of the docking bays like insects around a nest. The ship was alive with activity. Somewhere inside that metal monster were the aliens who had destroyed his world. A voice spoke over the radio in the harsh Velithran language. Tae-ho had studied their language for months. The voice was asking for identification and mission status. Tae-ho pressed a button to send the correct response codes. His heart beat faster as he waited. After a few seconds, the voice spoke again. This time it was giving him permission to dock in Bay 7. Tae-ho almost smiled. The first part of the plan was working. He guided the small ship toward the docking bay. The entrance was huge, big enough for ships 10 times larger than his. As he flew inside, massive doors closed behind him. There was no going back now. The docking bay was filled with alien ships. Some were fighters, sleek and fast. Others were transport ships, built to carry troops and supplies. At the far end of the bay, Tae-ho could see several human civilian ships. These were probably captured during raids on the colonies. The sight of them made his anger burn hotter. Tae-ho landed his ship in an empty spot near the wall. He turned off the engines and sat quietly for a moment. Around him, alien workers moved between the ships. They looked like humans, but were taller and thinner. Their skin was pale gray and their eyes were completely black. They moved with quick, jerky motions that reminded Tae-ho of insects. He checked his equipment one more time. Hidden in his suit were several small explosives. He had a plasma cutter disguised as a medical tool. Most importantly, he had the virus storage device. It looked like a simple datapad, but it contained enough destructive code to bring down the entire ship's computer network. Tae-ho opened the ship's door and stepped out. The artificial gravity felt slightly different from human standard. The air smelled strange, like metal and chemicals. He forced himself to walk with the same jerky movements as the aliens around him. 2 Velithran guards approached him. They wore black armor and carried energy weapons. Tae-ho's muscles tensed, ready to fight, but the guards simply scanned him with a small device. The scanner beeped once and showed a green light. The disguise was working. One of the guards spoke, to him in Velithran. It was asking about his mission report. Tae-ho responded with the prepared answers he had memorized. He said his patrol had found nothing interesting. The guard seemed satisfied and waved him toward the exit. Tae-ho walked across the docking bay trying to look casual. Inside his suit, sweat ran down his back. Every step took him deeper into enemy territory. Every second brought him closer to discovery or death. The exit led to a long corridor with walls made of smooth metal. The ceiling was low, designed for the tall but thin Velithran bodies. Blue lights ran along the walls, giving everything an eerie glow. The air recycling system hummed quietly overhead. Other aliens moved through the corridor, going about their duties. None of them paid attention to Tae-ho. To them, he was just another soldier returning from patrol. He had studied their behavior patterns for weeks. He knew how they moved, how they talked, how they acted around each other. As he walked, Tae-ho tried to memorize the layout. The corridor branched off in several directions. Signs on the walls were written in Velithran script, but he had learned to read their basic symbols. One direction led to the crew quarters, another led to the weapon systems, a third led toward the center of the ship, where the main computer core would be located. That was his destination. The computer core controlled everything on the ship: navigation, weapons, life support, communications. If he could plant the virus there, it would spread through every system. The ship would tear itself apart from the inside. But first, he had to get there without being caught. The ship was huge, with thousands of corridors and millions of aliens. One mistake would mean death. One wrong turn could end the mission before it really began. Tae-ho chose the corridor that led toward the ship's center. He walked steadily, not too fast, not too slow. Just another Velithran soldier doing his job. Around him, the alien mothership hummed with deadly purpose, preparing to destroy Earth and wipe out humanity forever. But they did not know that death had already come aboard their ship. Death in the form of one human man who had nothing left, to lose and everything to gain by making them pay for what they had done.